white bride humiliated the black caterer, thinking no one was watching. But her groom knew the truth, and he revealed it to everyone. Before we dive into this story, make sure to support Black Journey by hitting subscribe. Let's grow this channel to 1,000 subscribers and continue sharing powerful stories from Black lives. The morning sun poured its golden warmth across the sprawling garden, lighting up rows of ivory roses and crystal chandeliers that sparkled like stars. Every chair, every napkin, every detail was perfectly arranged. It was the kind of wedding that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Elegant, rich, and carefully staged to impress. The bride, Amanda, stood near the floral archway, her white gown flowing like liquid silk as she checked her reflection for the 10th time. Her smile looked perfect, but her eyes carried something sharper, something rehearsed. Today was her day, and she wanted the world to see it. Her soon-to-be husband, David, was the quiet type, gentle, composed, a man who smiled easily but never spoke without purpose. People said they were the perfect couple. She, the picture of beauty and charm. He, the successful businessman who carried himself with grace. But beneath the surface, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. The sound of a van's engine rolled up the long driveway, breaking the hum of wedding chatter. A catering team stepped out, dressed in crisp uniforms, carrying trays and boxes of food. Among them was a woman who immediately caught David's attention, Vanessa. She was in her 30s, with warm brown skin and a calm, confident presence. Her hair was tied neatly, and her eyes scanned the scene with quiet focus. She was the kind of woman who didn't need to speak loudly to command respect. Her team followed her lead, moving with efficiency and care. Vanessa had built her catering business from nothing. She'd started with a borrowed oven and a handful of clients who believed in her. Years of hard work had finally paid off. She had a reputation for excellence, and this wedding could take her career to new heights. When she stepped into the garden, she felt proud, excited, and nervous all at once. But that pride faded the moment Amanda saw her. But Amanda didn't stop there. "You're in charge?" she asked, her tone filled with disbelief. "You?" Vanessa nodded softly. "Yes, ma'am. My team and I will make sure everything goes smoothly." Amanda's lips curved into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "We'll see about that," she said, turning her back and walking away, her white train sweeping the ground behind her. The guests exchanged awkward looks, pretending not to have heard, but the air had changed. The beauty of the garden now felt colder, sharper, like the petals of the roses were made of glass. Vanessa stood still for a moment, trying to steady her breath. She had faced rudeness before, but something about Amanda's tone carried more than just arrogance. It carried disgust. Still, she refused to let it break her. She reminded herself why she was there. This was her business, her moment, and no one was going to take that away. She turned to her team and smiled faintly. "Let's do our best," she said. "Ignore the noise." As the afternoon unfolded, Vanessa and her team worked quietly, preparing the appetizers and setting the tables with care. She moved gracefully through the crowd, always polite, always professional. But Amanda's eyes followed her, every movement, every gesture, as if waiting for her to make a mistake. David noticed. He had seen glimpses of this side of Amanda before, but today it felt uglier, more public. He wanted to step in, to say something, but the weight of the day, the crowd, the expectations, held him still. Instead, he watched Vanessa with quiet respect. There was a dignity about her that didn't need defending. She carried herself with calm confidence that made him question everything around him. As the music swelled again and laughter filled the air, Vanessa caught her reflection in a glass window. For a moment, she saw not a caterer, but a woman who had fought her way here, a woman whose hands had built something real, something beautiful. She smiled softly to herself and went back to work. But deep down, something told her this day was going to be different. Something in Amanda's glare, in the unease in David's eyes, whispered that this wedding wouldn't end the way anyone expected. There was too much pride in the air, too much cruelty hiding behind white lace and forced smiles. The roses smelled sweet, but the tension beneath them was starting to rot. And as the sun climbed higher over the glittering mansion, Vanessa's quiet strength would soon collide with a truth powerful enough to shatter the illusion of perfection. The afternoon sun poured down on the garden, turning the crystal chandeliers into prisms of scattered light. Laughter echoed over the neatly trimmed lawn, and the smell of roses mixed with the scent of fresh pastries. But beneath the surface of this so-called perfect wedding, tension simmered. Vanessa moved through the crowd with her team, trays in hand, quietly making sure that each table was set just right. Every bite, every drink, every detail mattered to her, because she knew that excellence was her only armor in a world that often judged her before it saw her talent. Amanda's eyes, however, followed her like a hawk. Every time Vanessa bent to adjust a napkin or poured a glass of champagne, Amanda's lips pressed into a thin line. Her words, when they came, were sharp and deliberate, aimed not at the logistics, but at Vanessa herself. "Be careful with those glasses," she said loudly enough for a nearby group of guests to hear. "We wouldn't want someone like her to ruin anything." Vanessa's hands shook slightly as she adjusted the silver tray. She had been humiliated before, but not in such a public, calculated way. Amanda wasn't simply dismissive. She was cruel, enjoying the power she thought she had over someone who, in her mind, was beneath her. Vanessa forced herself to smile, nodding politely, hiding the fire that had ignited inside her chest. She knew she couldn't let anger take control. Her professionalism had carried her this far, and she would not let someone else tarnish the work she loved. The guests continued their conversations, trying to ignore the tension, but whispers rippled across the lawn. Some glanced at Vanessa with sympathy. Others shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react. David watched from a few feet away, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the interaction. He had always known that Amanda could be dismissive, even sharp at times, but this public, targeted cruelty was something else entirely. He felt a mixture of anger and disbelief, a storm gathering in his chest. He wanted to step in, to defend Vanessa, but the eyes of the crowd held him back. Amanda's attacks grew bolder. She complained about the appetizers, calling them cheap and unsuitable for a wedding like this, though every dish had been carefully prepared to the highest standard. When one of Vanessa's assistants accidentally dropped a small dessert plate, Amanda laughed, a cruel, clipped sound that made Vanessa's stomach twist. "Oh, that's just perfect," she said to her guests, shaking her head in exaggerated disappointment. "I hope this is just a fluke." Vanessa didn't respond. She simply knelt, picked up the plate, and continued her work, hiding the swelling sting in her throat. Every humiliation, every whispered insult was a test, but Vanessa knew she could endure it. She had learned long ago that dignity wasn't about the absence of cruelty. It was about how you held yourself when cruelty was present. David noticed the way Vanessa carried herself, even under Amanda's relentless scrutiny. There was something in her stance, in the way her shoulders squared with quiet determination, that reminded him of strength he had admired in others, but rarely seen so clearly. And yet, as Amanda's sneering continued, David felt the weight of his own helplessness. He wanted to speak, to tell Amanda to stop, but he also knew that confrontation here could spiral, ruin the day for everyone, and perhaps even humiliate Vanessa further. Vanessa moved among the tables, offering smiles, ensuring no guest felt overlooked, and hiding the sting of Amanda's constant commentary. She saw the shocked eyes of children, the nervous shifting of mothers, and the uncomfortable glances exchanged between friends who weren't sure how to act. Through it all, she never faltered. Every tray she carried, every dessert she served, every delicate adjustment she made was a statement of her competence, her grace, and her refusal to be diminished. By mid-afternoon, the garden had turned golden with the light of the sun, but the tension had not eased. Amanda's comments continued, cutting like thin blades, yet Vanessa maintained her composure. She moved with quiet dignity, the invisible armor of pride protecting her from the sting of humiliation. David watched, silently acknowledging that the bride he had thought he knew was showing a side he had not anticipated. And while the guests smiled and clinked glasses, enjoying the illusion of celebration, an unspoken truth lingered in the air. This wedding, this perfect day, was already on the edge of collapse, and the storm of consequences had only just begun to gather. Vanessa kept working, holding her head high, knowing that no matter how much Amanda tried to diminish her in front of the world, the truth of her skill, her worth, and her dignity could not be taken. Every move she made spoke louder than Amanda's words ever could, and slowly, invisibly, she began to shift the attention in the room, not through confrontation, but through quiet, undeniable excellence. And in that silent battle, the first cracks of change had begun to form. The afternoon had started to wane, and the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow across the garden. Music swelled softly, mingling with the hum of conversations and laughter that tried to mask the tension lingering in the air. Vanessa moved gracefully among the tables, carrying trays with precision, her eyes scanning the guests, ensuring everything was perfect. She had worked tirelessly all afternoon, handling insults and whispers with the calm composure of someone who had endured far worse and refused to break. Every step she took was a statement. Dignity could not be bought, and it could not be stolen. Amanda, however, had not relented. She floated among her guests like a queen observing her court, but every so often, her gaze flickered toward Vanessa with barely concealed disdain. She made small, cutting remarks that seemed casual, but were designed to humiliate. "I can't believe the desserts look like that," she muttered, loud enough for Vanessa to hear. "Do they usually present food like this?" She laughed softly at her own words, the sound sharp, artificial. Vanessa's hands shook slightly as she set down a tray, her jaw tightening as she swallowed the bitter taste of humiliation. She had trained herself to take pride in her work, to see her excellence as a shield, and she leaned on that strength now more than ever. David had been observing quietly. He had seen the subtle cruelty before, the flickers of judgment, the cold comments. But the way Amanda carried herself today, publicly, was beyond anything he could have imagined. His stomach churned with discomfort as he watched the woman he was about to marry treat someone with such obvious contempt. And yet, he noticed Vanessa's response, a calm, unwavering professionalism that radiated strength. She did not retaliate, did not argue, did not crumble. She simply moved with purpose, her dignity intact, and David's admiration grew quietly, painfully. As the wedding progressed toward the evening, it was time for the first dance. The guests gathered, forming a circle around Amanda and David, who moved to the center with the delicate steps rehearsed in private lessons. Vanessa and her team retreated to the sidelines, quietly serving champagne and desserts, careful not to interrupt the spectacle. Vanessa's chest tightened as she saw Amanda laughing, radiant, seemingly oblivious to the way she had demeaned the woman who had worked tirelessly to make this day beautiful. Then, just as the music shifted to a slower, more intimate song, David's hand rested lightly on Amanda's, but he did not move to embrace her. The crowd noticed the pause, the slight hesitation, and whispers began to circulate. Amanda's smile faltered. "What is it?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with confusion and irritation. David took a deep breath, his eyes moving across the crowd until they landed on Vanessa. "Miss, could you come here for a moment?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. Vanessa froze for a moment, then stepped forward slowly, uncertain what he intended, but sensing that the moment had arrived. All eyes turned toward her. Amanda's smile disappeared entirely, replaced by a flush of irritation and disbelief. Vanessa moved with measured steps, her head high, her composure unbroken. David turned to the crowd, his voice rising slightly so everyone could hear. "I wasn't going to say this here today," he began, "but after what I've seen this afternoon, I cannot remain silent." A hush fell over the garden. Guests leaned in, some shocked, some curious. Amanda's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift in control. David continued, "Vanessa is not just our caterer. She is the owner of the company, a brilliant professional whose skill and dedication have made this event flawless. She accepted this job because I personally requested her, because I wanted excellence, because I wanted respect. She deserves admiration, not scorn." Amanda's face paled as whispers spread. David's gaze hardened, meeting hers. "And you," he said, his voice quieter but sharper, "chose to humiliate her in front of everyone, simply because you judged her before you knew her. That is not the person I thought I was marrying. I cannot marry someone who treats others with such cruelty." The guests gasped, and the tension in the air became almost tangible. Amanda opened her mouth, trying to speak, but no words came. David took off his ring, holding it in his hand for everyone to see. "This wedding is over," he said. Vanessa's eyes widened, but she did not move to intervene. Instead, she allowed herself a small, relieved breath. She had faced prejudice and cruelty all her life, but today, justice had arrived in the form of truth, and dignity had won. The crowd was silent, some nodding quietly in recognition, some looking ashamed, but everyone had witnessed the power of calm, unwavering grace. David stepped aside, his gaze lingering on Vanessa with gratitude and respect. She had endured, held herself with elegance under fire, and now the world could see what true strength looked like. Amanda, meanwhile, remained frozen, her illusions of control shattered in an instant. The music faded, the garden was quiet, and in that stillness, Vanessa's quiet triumph shone brighter than any chandelier, brighter than any white rose, brighter than any gown or display of wealth. Today, dignity had carried the day. The garden had grown quiet, the golden light of late afternoon stretching long shadows across the perfectly trimmed lawn. Guests hovered uncertainly, some frozen in surprise, others exchanging glances, unsure where to look or what to say. The celebration that had promised so much joy and laughter now felt heavy, filled with tension, shame, and revelation. Vanessa stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her, absorbing the moment with a calm that came from years of weathering disrespect. She had endured Amanda's insults, her sneers, her calculated humiliation, and yet here she stood, unbroken, a quiet pillar of dignity amidst chaos. Amanda's white gown, once a symbol of her pride and control, now seemed almost absurd against the backdrop of embarrassment she could not hide. Her mouth opened and closed, searching for words, but none came. Her eyes darted from guest to guest, seeking support or affirmation, but she found none. The crowd's attention had shifted, and every gaze seemed to underline her mistake. Pride, it appeared, could crumble as quickly as it was built, especially when confronted with truth and integrity. David stood near Vanessa, his expression softened by a mixture of relief and quiet sorrow. He had made a choice, one that he knew would change everything in his personal life, but he could not ignore the cruelty he had witnessed. He looked at Vanessa, and in her calm, composed face, he saw what he had been searching for: unwavering strength and grace. "You don't need to apologize," he said quietly, just to her. "You've shown everyone here what true professionalism and dignity look like." Vanessa's lips curved into a faint smile. She had learned early in life that strength was not always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, almost invisible, yet undeniably powerful. "I've learned to carry myself this way," she said softly. "Even when others try to diminish you, you can't let their cruelty define you." Her voice was steady, but it carried the weight of every challenge she had faced, every slight she had endured, and every time she had been underestimated simply because of her skin. Some guests, moved by what had transpired, began to approach her. They whispered apologies, expressed admiration, and offered congratulations. A few had looked away during the insults, unsure how to act, but now they sought to acknowledge the strength they had witnessed. Vanessa nodded, graciously accepting their words, understanding that this moment was bigger than herself. It was a small victory for every person who had ever been judged unfairly, overlooked, or underestimated. Amanda, meanwhile, slipped quietly away, her head bowed. She had lost more than the wedding in this moment. She had lost the illusion of control she had clung to so desperately. Her beauty and her dress could not shield her from the truth. Cruelty and arrogance leave marks, and today the world had seen them. David, standing beside Vanessa, gave her a small, grateful nod. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted softly, "but thank you. You reminded everyone here of something important. You reminded me." Vanessa's smile deepened just slightly, a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes the greatest impact comes from simply being who you are, without compromise. As the sun dipped further, casting a soft, silvery glow over the garden, Vanessa's team began to pack up. She moved among them, instructing quietly, calmly, making sure everything was done with the same care and excellence that had defined their work all day. And as she stepped toward her van under the dimming light, she felt the weight of the day lift from her shoulders. The humiliation she had endured was no longer a burden. It had been transformed into a testament of her strength. The garden, which had once felt like a stage for cruelty, now seemed to glow with something else entirely: justice, dignity, and truth. Vanessa walked with her head held high, understanding fully that the world could never diminish the person who refused to be diminished. She carried herself with the quiet power of someone who knew that pride, courage, and grace could not be taken, only earned, and that they shone brightest when tested most harshly. And in that moment, as the last rays of sunlight kissed the garden, Vanessa realized something profound. This day had not been about a wedding, a dress, or a moment of humiliation. It had been about something far greater: the resilience of a Black woman standing tall, refusing to be bowed, and teaching everyone who witnessed her that dignity and courage are the truest forms of victory. No applause, no acknowledgement, no riches could measure the power of that quiet triumph. And as she climbed into her van, the hum of the engine felt like a drumbeat of promise, a reminder that grace, strength, and truth would always carry her forward, no matter the obstacles, no matter the cruelty, no matter the world. Thank you for watching this story on Black Journey. If this touched your heart, please hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Together, we celebrate Black strength, dignity, and hope, one story at a time.